Hello, Nancy. Thank you for listening to me here today. I don't think I've ever done this before in regard to seeking out a total stranger and making a whole long video or writing them a whole long letter or anything like that in regard to me and my life work and my health and things of that nature. And I know that you probably don't have a lot of time in your life with all that you're doing. I know that's the case for me as well. So I'm going to do my best to keep this as short as possible. My reason for writing you, well, I have a lot of sub reasons that I'm going to talk to you about, but um, really the deepest reason is that I'm being guided through spiritual directive and that there's an unknown quantum about all of this. I'm going to call it a quantum that I don't know about. I just feel that strong. First of all, I feel a very strong soul connection to you. And secondly, I feel a strong connection to the work that you and your colleagues are doing. Now, I don't know a whole lot about it. I just discovered you, so to speak. But what I have heard has really, really resonated with me, both about you on a personal level, about what your energy field is to me, and also about the work that you and your colleagues are doing, and especially about Shungite. Really, that's the only thing I've explored in your videos and whatever up to this point is on the Shungite. But in order to set the stage, it's important for me, I feel, to tell you a little bit about me. I've had a rather unusual life, and I think there's some clues in there possibly for you in regard to why I'm feeling the way I am about contacting you. So I am just going to set about doing that now as succinctly as possible. It's a very large story, which I'm going to reduce and compact as much as possible here. To begin with, it's as you know at this point, my name is Sha'Maia-NEAAF. I am 69 years old. I'll be 70 in March. Yeah, I know I don't look like that in the photograph, but uh, what can I say? I just that's what my age is, and I'm actually have had lifelong health problems. Of course, this is me with makeup. Without makeup, I have really big dark circles under my eyes and that pallid, sort of sickly look. I praise makeup every day because it just makes such a difference. And I've been that way all my life. And when I was a teen, I started really noticing how I would look so much sicker than all my friends, and just a little bit of makeup made me look like they did. I mean, I looked healthy and I could fake it. So I've been that way ever since. I'm just a makeup addict. But what can I say? It's just who I am. And so I have had these health problems all my life, and I've always been seeking a remedy. I was very blessed with a mother that was doing the same for me, and not through the normal channels. The at first she pursued the normal channels when I was very young, and you know how long ago that was. So everybody thought that way. Oh, you got to go to a doctor. But very soon she found out, I don't think so. This is not the way to be going with my child. I need to seek alternative methods. And she did very early on in all of this for me. But let me get back to the main gist of my story here. When I was born in Venezuela. My father worked for an oil company there. Um, and so I spent the first 2, 3 years of my life in that country. When I was 6 months old, I started making really sort of strange noises. And my mother knew it wasn't the diaper pen. She just knew that. She just said, well, this is not something ailing her. I just need to take her outside. Why she knew that, she didn't know, but she knew she had to take me outside. And this would always be at night. And so when I got outside on this one occasion, but it might have happened more than once, I did calm down, but this one occasion, she said that, and I was 6 months old, I pointed my finger to the heavens and I said, star. Well, she didn't know where this came from. I was 6 months old. She wasn't training me outside to point to the heavens and say star. She wasn't even sure how I knew the word star. That started it. I'm just highlighting a few things along the way. We lived on my father owned a dairy farm in the Ozarks when I was 4 and 5, I believe. And at that time, I had these experiences where I didn't know at the time what they were, of course. I was 4, and it was 1954 or something, 3, 2, whatever. And I would be flying through the air toward a desert mountain. Now, this was in the Ozarks, and we didn't have a television. Once in a while, we went to the movies, but I would be flying through the air toward a desert mountain, and I would go inside the mountain. And in there were these men. Unfortunately, I don't think I saw any women, but there were these men, very tall, nice-looking, blonde-looking men in skin-tight white suits. And they were very nice and friendly and really loving toward me. It's the only expression I can use, in the sense that there was a loving feeling, And there were these tall boxes, I thought, in those days. They were computer towers, is what they were, all through this room, just all over the place. And they weren't very big. They weren't like massive ones. They were just like you'd have in a very good computer. You might have a computer tower, well, that's what they look like. And there were a lot of them in this room. And they told me these were machines. And they just started discussing the machines with me like I was not only an adult, but maybe a science professor or something. And I understood everything, I understood everything they were telling me. And when I returned, when I woke up, obviously it was an astral trip, but when I returned, I told my mother about it. And instead of saying, oh, that's, that's just a dream, honey, or something like that, she took it totally seriously, very matter-of-factly. She didn't panic or anything. And she started writing down everything that I said I saw, and they said to me. Now, I didn't remember a lot, but one of the things that really stood out, which she wrote down, and I still have the paper that she wrote it on, because I drew little pictures, but the pictures were sort of abstract. I said was a clock controlled by the mind. I was 4 years old. This was Harrison, Arkansas, out on the dairy farm in 1952, I believe, something like that. So that's another incident. I'm just choosing certain ones here. Then the big turning point in my life was when I could never reconcile to going to school. It seemed like a total trap. It felt like it was draining me of my knowledge, my resources, and my wisdom. And from kindergarten wasn't so bad, but first grade, the minute I walked through the door, I went, oh my God. And I told my mother this in my own way. And I was very verbose, I guess you could say, at that age. I never spoke baby talk. I pretty much talked like I'm talking now, only in a littler voice. And I said things to her like, sometimes we only see a small part of something because we don't believe that there is anymore. That's something she wrote down when I was 6, I believe. So I very accurately told her that I didn't feel I belonged in this place. But she said, well, this is the law, you got to go to school. So she was really sweet about it, and she helped me. She'd sit there and wait till I went in and stay outside for a while. And, she did the best she could with the situation, but all of my school years was like that. So when I was in high school, junior year, I believe, I was going to go into study hall, which was this big round building outside. It was San Antonio and had all these round buildings. You just go round and round and round like little lab rats. And so I put my hand on the door to go into study hall, and I heard, not with my ears, but it was impressed very clearly in my brain. My name then, my birth name was Christine. Christine, if you go one more day, it will be dangerous. Now, this was not said to me, or did I feel it in a panic, or, it was very calm. And I was very calm. But I took my hand away from the door, because it was like that when I touched the door, that's what brought it through. I walked back to the car because my mother always waited until I went in. Not that she didn't believe I would go in, but this was, her support system. And she said, "What's the matter?" And I said, I told her exactly what happened. She looked at me very hard and she said, "Let's go home." And I never went back. 6 months later, I started my life's work. My mother saw that I was kind of despondent because I didn't know what I was going to do next. I mean, here I was, high school dropout, and I didn't want to go back to school for sure, but I was just kind of, depressed. And she came to me and she said, "Well, I know you like to write poetry." And I did some. I wasn't a real poetry freak, but I wrote it now and then. And she said, "Here's this contest in 17 magazine. Why don't you enter it, and see if you can win a poetry prize or something." She was just kind of desperate to find something for me to activate me a little bit. Well, maybe writing. I also was very sort of connected to my singing and dancing and thought I might pursue a, entertainment career, but I was sickly, and that was a problem. So anyway, I sat down in my little typewriter, non-electric typewriter, to type away maybe a little poem of some kind for this 17 magazine. I put my hands on the keys. Now, this is not automatic writing because I actually had done that when I was 12 or 13. My mother said, "Oh, we used to do automatic writing when we were kids. Maybe you'd like to try it." And it really worked for me big time. But the being that came through every time said, "If I don't sign my name here, you don't do this." And he said, "You don't need to do this anyway. You can do this yourself. You have all this knowledge within you. You don't need to do this." And I'm like 12. I'm going, huh? It didn't really connect. It was like, I don't know how to do this. So that was left in the wayside. But I knew what automatic writing felt like. And this certainly wasn't automatic typing. I wasn't doing that. But from my inner core soul being, it just came alive. I put my hands on the keys, and instead of typing a little poem, it was the moment. My moment had arrived, and I started writing about what I saw and felt and knew about an ancient people in Canada who lived there, had migrated there from a continent who had disappeared in the Pacific, and there was gray in the sky, so they called themselves the people of the gray moon. I had the names of these people. I wrote a whole chapter, and I brought it to my mother, and she read it, and she said, "I don't think this is for 17 magazine." We both took it very seriously. We knew. I said, "I'm not making this up, Mom," and she knew that. And she read it, and she said, "Yeah, we've got to find out what this is." So, we weren't, again, scrabbling around. We were just taking our life a day at a time. But one thing led to another, and we came across some books on Edgar Cayce. We knew sort of about Edgar Cayce in the mist over there of our minds, but we didn't really know a lot about him. That helped us out a little. Not that we read voraciously. We just pick up and read a little here, a little there. Then my mother came across Joan Grant's Far Memory books, and they were about reincarnation. We heard about reincarnation. We weren't against it, but we didn't, think much about it. But now we started thinking about it. And it was about also seeing into the Akasha. We got the word Akasha from Cayce, and then she started talking about seeing past lives and stuff. So we put it all together, and we came to the conclusion, not a solid one, but one that seemed to make sense. It was a working conclusion that I was tapping into the Akasha, which, as far as I'm concerned, to this day, turned out to be the case. So I said, this is over, a period of time, 6 months or a year. I don't remember how long this went on. And I said, well, if that's the case, I ought to be able to get it just about anything I want out of the Akasha, which isn't necessarily true. But at the time, that's what I thought. And I said, well, I'll just see. I really love science. Uh, I think I'll just, although, I didn't make grades in anything in school. Well, I made passing grades. I made passing grades, and I wasn't a disciplinary problem, nothing like that. But I just had a feel in my heart and soul that I love science. So I said, I'll start asking about, science. And I was also continuing to write this book, Under the Gray Moon, which incidentally we found out. My mother found another book by James Churchward, and he researched ancient languages all over the world, and he was convinced that Lemuria once existed, Mu, and he developed these vocables that he'd gotten from the Tibetans and all these people that he felt were the key root words of Mu. Well, of course, these people in Under the Gray Moon, my book, had migrated from this continent in the Pacific. So my mother got excited because she saw these, not all, but many of these vocables. When you connected them together, they made the names of the people in my book and the towns and the cities, and it made sense. Kanatachi, high on a hill, and that this was a city up on a mountain, and it just went on and on. So anyway, now I was ready to do some science. I rolled up my sleeves and I thought, okay, what was I was this is 1967, so I was 17, I was 18, I guess. Yeah. And I just started writing about science. And boy, that was very interesting. And what it turned out to be, now I look at it now, it's quantum physics, So around this time, we were watching TV one night, and here was this man named Edgar Mitchell, and he was a Captain Edgar Mitchell, and he was an astronaut. And he was getting ready with his fellows to go to the moon. And he was in the interview, he said, well, when I get back, I'm going to quit the NASA, and I'm going to start up this science of noetics research on parapsychology. Well, there's just nobody doing anything out there like that we saw. And my mother said to me, wow, he'd be a good person to get in touch with about your science, to see if it, it's crazy stuff or has any validity at all. So I agreed, and we put a little package together, and we mailed it off to NASA, to Edgar Mitchell. And it actually got to him, but it got to him after he came back from the moon, and after he was through with quarantine. And he told my mother when he called, and she answered, that he ordinarily didn't open, all that. There's so much mail you can imagine in those days for an astronaut. But his hand, he said, was literally drawn to my package. Well, when he read the science, he wanted to see me. So we were in San Antonio at the time. That's where we lived. And he asked us to come to Houston. He paid our way and motel rooms and everything, And he was still at NASA, so he met us at NASA. We actually got to go through the gates of NASA, and we drove up to the facility, and I don't even remember much about it, but except the big, huge room that we came into, like the Hall of Valhalla or something, with all the astronaut pictures. In those days, there were so few astronauts. They had all their pictures on the walls. He comes in with his little coffee cup and sits down, and we start talking. And what this developed into was us coming several times, and he was researching me. He told me that my science was valid. It was far beyond anything that they were working with at the time, but he had the most scientific degrees of any of the astronauts at that time, and he was telling me that this was real stuff, and he wanted to research it. So we met several times. There's a whole lot of story in this I'm going to skip. Very interesting stuff. Well, I'll tell you just briefly that, and during that time, I started having experiences with ultra-terrestrial beings, not just me, my mother as well. And they were really working with me with my health problems. And they would appear in my room at night, very solid-looking people. I would scream my head off when I saw them, I'm ashamed to say, but it was really hard to see a man who was well over 6 feet tall, standing over my bed. And they would commune with me through mental telepathy. They were helping me the best they could. They even floated balloons through my room one time. So I said, why the balloons? Because I looked at them and there they were, and they went right through the wall. And they said, well, you didn't scream. So we're trying to find ways to calm you down about seeing things that your mammalian brain tells you that shouldn't be there, so they even floated balloons through my room. So, but my mother didn't scream at all. She was fine with it. My mother was old enough to be my grandmother. I was her only child, born when she was 45. And she was born the year the Wright brothers flew Kitty Hawk. But they came into her room and she said, oh, hi. She had no problem. So they even got her up one night, one of my main physician, and for her to walk in the room first. And then he said, you go in first and I'll follow you. And then he followed her. I still screamed. But there was a whole long, this was going on during the time that around the same time it started when I went to see Captain Mitchell. So I thought, well, one of these visits, I think I'll just tell him about this, because a friend of mine was having a real problem. She was not really into all of this, but open-minded. And she had been married to a military man stationed in Japan. They had divorced many years ago, and she and her daughters moved to San Antonio, Texas. We had met, and etc. She had her house filled with these Japanese things that they brought over from Japan, all kinds of Japanese mementos. And suddenly one day she started having problems, and that was these people would show up at her house and scare her. They would say things to her she didn't understand. They were usually dressed in black suits with black ties, and sometimes they'd appear or disappear, and she didn't know what the heck was going on. Well, I said, I'll ask these ultra beings that I'm working with and see what they say. And they said, well, she has something. Her husband was working on a secret type of thing, and he smuggled something out, and it's a little tiny device, and it's inside one of these Japanese jack-o'-lantern things, dioramas, I think they're called. Her house was filled with these dioramas. I don't see how they could sleep at night with these things staring at them, faces, And he said they was in one of those, and she just needed to get rid of it, and these guys would go away. I'm making the story very short, as short as I can. So they told me which one it was. I pointed it out to her. She took a sledgehammer, not a sledgehammer, but a hammer, and opened it up, and there was this little silver thing inside, And they said, just throw it away. So she threw it away, got it as far away from her as possible, and all of this stuff stopped. So I thought, I'm going to tell Edgar Mitchell about this. So I did. I told him about that, but I told him about the ultra beings too. I didn't go into great detail. At that time, this was all just starting up. And he leaned over and said to me, you tell him, damn it, leave me alone. And that's what he said about it. He looked kind of frightened. I don't know what experiences he'd had in his voyage. We know later, of course, he came through and started talking about the fact that he knew ETs were real and all of this stuff, but he'd never seen any. And he started talking about it in much later years. But this was a young Edgar Mitchell, very young, red-headed, little red goatee beard. Not goatee, but it was kind of short like that. So he was afraid of it at the time. In fact, he and his then very small group of noetics associates were sitting at the table with me eating, and they started talking about UFOs. And they said, what do you think about that, Ed? And he got up and left. He said, I don't want to talk about it. He got up and left the room. So things were going on there. But anyway, he was no help with that particular subject. So after a few times with him, he knelt down in front of me and he said, he said, Christine, you're the most exciting thing I've come across so far, but I can see now that this would take my whole energy, everything, just focus on you and your work. And I've already started the noetics, and this is where I feel I need to go, so I just can't do this anymore. So we parted company, but on a good note. I was disappointed, of course, because I thought, oh, this science is going to help the world, and I'll give it to him, and he'll, do all kinds of wonderful things with it. And possibly it could have been, but, he made his choice, and I certainly respect that. But what he did give me was the knowledge that what I was doing was for real. Now, when I say for real, I want to stipulate that I don't believe and I never have, but I especially don't believe in my older years, that everything that comes out of my little mouth or I type down is absolutely, totally for real, right down to the last little molecule. I'm a human being. I have a lens, and I translate through that lens. I'm not being taken over by anybody. I'm translating through from the kasha, and I'll get to my other sources in a moment. And I can make mistakes. I can see it wrong or not get something quite right. Sometimes, you know, I that happens just in the moment, and they immediately correct me. So I'm assuming they immediately correct most of my mistakes, but I'm sure some of them get through the filter, you know. So I'm not claiming that, but I knew then, and things have happened in my over 50 years of doing this now that have convinced me that largely there's got to be a basis of truth for what I bring through. So where am I in all of this long story to you? Okay, then the ultra beings, and sometimes the ultra beings, as I said, would appear to both my mother and myself on rare occasions, but it happened. We compared notes. We saw the same thing. Then they started telling me that I had a benefactor, they called it. I now call him my mentor. It's a term that people understand a little bit better, but they use the word benefactor. And that this was a soul, a being that had been with me all the time and was with me, but I couldn't commune with him yet. So they were bringing me up to speed, I guess, with a lot of things they were doing with me and helping me with my health and all of this. I believe I'd be dead by now if it hadn't been for them and the things they did. They even helped my friend's little nephew because I asked them to, and it was amazing what happened for him. He was like 4, and he started seeing them. Of course, my friend didn't tell him anything, and certainly didn't tell his parents, who wouldn't have believed in this sort of thing. But the minute my sources said that they would, my ultra friends said they would work with him with his speech problem, because he couldn't communicate at all, and the doctors had diagnosed him with something. They said, oh, he'll probably never talk right, you know, and all of this. They started working with him, and he started telling his aunt about these men that were appearing in his room. Didn't frighten him, but he described them. It was them, you know. Anyway, some months later, he started talking. Everything was fine. So, you know, this is something that really was a powerful experience in my life. And so when they told me that this other being was my mentor, my benefactor, and soon I would be able to, you know, start communicating with him. Well, it was really 10 years later, but it happened, and the being turned out to be, according to what I received, Thoth, the Thoth that was with the pyramids in Egypt and the ibis-headed god and all of that. He was a real person. And there's a whole story about him. We'll go into all of that, but Thoth has been with me ever since. Now, Thoth is a soul, highly evolved soul, but he's also capable of creating this streaming. It's a streaming energy, and he has his own Akashic record. It's not different from the rest. It's formatted in a specific way. And I'm resonant with that. So there's Thoth Akasha, and there's the streaming. That's the combination of the being and the Akasha that he creates that streams through me. So there's a lot of different aspects of all of this. But I'm not a medium. He doesn't like walk into my body or anything. God, I hope not. That would scare me to death. So anyway, that took place in 1977. That's when he came to me, and we started working together. It was a process, slow development. He actually had what he called a scribe that helped make the connection between us, and there's a whole story to that right there. So that's where I've been doing ever since 1977. Now, the ultras started fading away. They said, well, you don't really need us so much anymore. We're going to move in the background a little bit and more until they just finally didn't communicate with me anymore. So there's a lot more, but you know, all these years I've still dealt with my health problem. chronic fatigue ad infinitum, and this was even before Wi-Fi and all of that. You know, when I was 18, I told my mother, I think I must have leukemia because I'm so tired all the time. It's the only thing I could come up with without Google was leukemia. Um, so I've been this way, all, better, worse, you know, but all the time have chronic colon problems and the chronic fatigue and hypoglycemic adrenal problems, all of these things. So I'm now in Crestone, Colorado. I was sent here. They asked me to come way back in 1994, and I stayed here for 7 years and left, and I'm back again. I came back in 2017 in February. Again, there's a whole dramatic story with all of this. I'm just skipping huge reams of stuff here. But Crestone is you see the picture of the mountain there behind me, the main mountain that I work with that Thoth calls Crest in the Stone. I'm not going into all of that right now, but just that this is a very special place on the planet, energy-wise. And so I've been I was married for 17 years, and I've been divorced now for about 8 years. That's a whole other story. But I've never had any children, and when I married, I was 45. I've had a very unusual life in many ways, and in some ways, I'm still 16 years old because I've not lived out in the world like most people have. And I only had one job at Dairy Queen when I was 16 for 6 months. And my mother and I both agreed that that kind of thing was not where I was supposed to be doing. And she supported me spiritually as much physically as she could with her Social Security. We both, I mean, I don't have a regular living. I mean, yeah, I do my work through my offerings. You know, people buy things from me, readings and sacred art and whatever, but it doesn't pay the bills. I get certain large donations at times, boom, out of nowhere. Somebody just, there it is, you know? And then for a long time, nothing. And I'm going, oh, what's going to happen next? And then it happens again. You know, somehow I'm always taken care of. But I've lived very isolated life in many ways, except for the computer. See, my life is connected to the computer, to the internet, I'm a cyber chick, as my friend calls me. I love computers. I love cell phones, anything that has buttons that I can press. I don't know. I must have been Captain Kirk in my past life or something. But, and of course, all this stuff is Wi-Fi and, you know, smart meters are zinging through my house and all of this stuff. So I was already in this condition, and now I've got all this stuff that's constantly in my body. And I broke my hip several years ago, tripping over my cat. So I don't walk especially well, even though I did teach dancing with my mother. That's, you know, when I was young. So I love dancing, but that's in the past now. I'm desperate for solutions to keep me alive and feeling better on my computer with my cell phone in a house that I've rented and has a smart meter right on the other side of the wall here. I just discovered the smart meter the other day when my Thothic guidance led me to look for it, because I got this beamer pad, and there's a miracle. It cost $6,000, but the money just came to me, boom. And when Thoth said, you need this now, the money was there, boom, there it was. So I bought the beamer, and it's fabulous, but there's something interfering with it, and I could feel the interference, and I thought maybe Wi-Fi. And Thoth said, yes, but it's the smart meter. And so I went and found the smart meter. Indeed, I had one, and that's when the Shungite started. Well, actually, Thoth was always sort of with Shungite for me, and I didn't pay too much attention to it. I had a little Shungite pyramid my friend gave me. It was on the altar somewhere. I would get all these altar things. But recently, when Thoth guided me to get this selenite's light sword from Tom Ledden. You probably know about him. So the money appeared. I got the sword, and Tom said, well, what do you want on the end of the sword? And Thoth said to me, Shungite pyramid. So that's what he put on it. So that's where Shungite became a little more prominent. Oh, the Shungite pyramid on the sword. This must be really special. But then when all of this, so then because I'm here, there's a whole other story about my connection to these people who are here and what we're doing together. Now I have other people that are working with me, and we've established the Sacred Academy for Geoenergetics, SAGE, and we're working with a lot of the energy kinds of things you're working with. This is in our plans. We're just starting up. Quite a bit of it right now is based on my material, my channeling, because that's what's present now. Although I don't like to call it channeling. Thoth calls it source translation. But so I'm starting a new phase of my life. I have other people in my life that I'm working with. So one of the things that has come through that Thoth said is a real priority right now, and this is a secret project. This is nothing to put out commercially or anything like that. He calls it the Nodis spheres. They're to be copper hollow spheres, and the main component inside is Shungite. There are other components, but Shungite is the main one. So again, here Shungite came up in my presence. And then Thoth started saying, well, because of the smart meter and everything, surround yourself with Shungite. So I took the little pyramid that my friend had given me, and I put it next to my head when I was lying on the beamer. Oh my God. It started clearing the field. I could start feeling the beamer, and the beamer really started working for me at that point. So I was convinced then. So I mentioned to my friend, one of the people in our group of workers here with SAGE, and what we're doing is Johannine Templars. That's a whole nother story. And she said, oh, I've came across this Shungite website, and it's really fabulous. It was your cosmic reality. So I went to that and started, and I got a little pendant from you, and it's the $90 one that's wrapped in the one. And then I went back, and I've recently ordered a bunch more, and I told my friend Jerry in Idaho, he ordered some stuff for you, but he's very generous. He said, what else do you want from them? And I'll order it for you. So I got some more stuff. So I've got two packages of stuff from you on its way to me. I do have the pendant already, but the other things. So I'm really excited about working with all of this. But back to our project, our Nodis project, there's a lot with that, and what it's to be done is to place these spheres in certain nodal points on the planet. And I'm not going to go into the whole detail right now. I can share more about it later with you if you're interested. But they're only to be there for a certain period of time, and then they're no longer needed. They're needed to make the connection. It might be several years, but then they're no longer needed, and the connection is made. The connection is between the human element, the person that is gardening this sphere. It has to be in their home or something, so their energy field can be with it. They don't go and bury it off on a mountain somewhere. And with the central sonatoma, that's the word that is used by my sources since the 1980s, when I started writing about the inner earth and the properties thereof. And it actually connects to the Gaia, the heart of Gaia. And there's something called the Pymander, which is it's a computer developed it's an energy thought mind computer without nuts and bolts, plasma based. And it is something that Thoth creates or works with. It's one of many, but the Pymander is his, so to speak, under his authority or whatever. And he started telling me about the Pymander many, many, many years ago. But anyway, now the Pymander will interact with these Nodis spheres. It just needs a point that can connect to the human element, the human being that's involved with it. And then it goes into the central sonatoma, and it connects there. I'm really butchering the whole explanation here because it's so vast. But that's basically it. And it's going to help. It's just one program, many programs that they said they, not only Thoth, but the other beings that are working with other people using different formats. And ours is just one of these programs. It's not like we're here to save the world or anything. We have one program we're working with, but it's important because each program is important. So, and now we get to the big Shungite part here that I want to share with you. And that is, in making these things, it came up with Thoth about the Terra Mandalas. Now, my former husband, Simeon, and I, when we lived here before, in the 90s, I received information on the Terra Mandalas, and they were just simple copper geometric designs with crushed rose quartz in them. But they were worked with Thoth and the Pymander and all of this to create these energy fields with them. And Thoth was wanting us to take the inner part of one and design that into the nodosphere. That was fine. We could do that. But I started getting the feeling from Thoth, you need the Terra Mandalas. You need the Terra. I thought, well, I don't have them. They're long gone. I don't know where they went. We sold them. I don't remember. They're gone. I don't have them. Well, so I just chalked that one off. And, but there was a man that we knew in those days, before we left for Hawaii, when Simi and I moved to Hawaii, that we gave some stuff to, and he contacted me. I didn't even remember him. I didn't remember. Well, I remember him, but that we'd given anything to him. He said, "Oh, I have this, some of the Andaras and the powder. I'll get to that in a minute. I'm going to bring you, because I haven't kept it all these years. Going to bring it to you." He was in Denver, and I said, "Fine, that's great." So he, I made it. He was coming to see me, but that was like a month before he'd said he was coming. So I knew there was this due date when he was going to be arriving on my door with these packages and things. So this was like 3 days after I knew I had to have these Terra Mandalas, and I didn't have them. So I'm telling Thoth, I'm sorry, I don't have Terra Mandalas, unless you want us to make new ones. And I hope not, because that's a big deal. So Steve arrives at my door, good-natured Steve. He's bringing in these things that he brought some beautiful pictures we had that we bought when we were in Egypt. And this is nice. And all of a sudden, Nancy, out of his car comes the Terra Mandalas, 2 of them, the 2 main ones. I had no idea he had them. He didn't mention them at all. So now I have the Terra Mandalas that I needed for this project, because they're going to be used to charge these nodospheres. And they're sitting in my living room. And Jerry sent me this huge Shungite pyramid, and Thoth wanted it to go right in the middle of these Terra Mandalas. And I have some of the Yandar crystals around. And this is a setup for working with all of this. So the powder. First of all, gosh, I know this is going on and on, but there's just so much. I don't know if you're familiar with what they call Andara crystals. Well, actually, it's just glass, but it's a very special glass because it's been energized by ultra beings a long time ago. At least the ones that come off of Nellie's land. And Thoth, at the time, prophesied that they would be finding more on other people's lands, which they are now. Although a lot of it being sold now is fake. But back in 1994, 95, a woman approached us, me actually, saying, well, I've heard that you do this channeling and whatever, and I have this friend named Nellie, and she has this land in California, and they're finding these giant glass spheres on the land and this powder of different colors around this. Could you give us some information on this? And I was the one that received the original information, and the name Andara and all of that came through my information on it. So I have a particular connection to the Andaras. And Nellie sent us tons of Andara crystals. She sent us tons of this mysterious powder that was around it. And we didn't hold on much of any of it. I wish I had it now. I've actually had people give me Andara because they know that, I was the one that originally channeled the information. They feel sorry for me because I hardly had any Andara. So I have Andara now, but not as much as I had before. And it's so expensive. People are charging fortunes for it. I could support myself for 6 months if I had some of that stuff now. longer actually. Anyway, so he brings some Indara. I was a little disappointed. I thought he was going to bring me a bunch, but it's just a few pieces. But he brought me a ton of this powder. Now, this powder, the powder has been infused like the Indara has, but it's really more potent. The Indara is prettier, but the powder is more potent. And there were very specific circles of this powder, or ring, or areas. There was the pink powder, the white powder, the gray powder, the yellow powder, and the black powder. And they weren't, they were just like little deposits, poof, poof, poof. And inside these powder deposits were the Indara glass, actually trash glass, just old trash glass that had been infused with the energy of the original Indara crystals that the beings, the whole story. Anyway, but the powder was even more potent. So he brought me a big old bunch of the black, which is the most powerful, and some of the gray. They call silver, but it's gray powder. Now, I took a look at this black powder and I thought, I bet you this has C60 molecules in it. Now, I don't know for sure, but I bet it does. Even if it doesn't, it's powerful stuff. I know, I've worked with it. And it arriving at this time with the shungite, and there's no coincidence to that either. The see what I was my mind just skipped a beat here. Going to tell, Thotha told me that if I mix the shungite powder, which I just bought some from Amazon, it's not here yet, the shungite powder with, a little bit of shungite with a little bit of what Thoth calls the prima matra, black powder, that the two parts of a full matrix will come together. There's more parts to the matrix as well. He calls it an energy matrix of some kind. And even though shungite is not this prima matra powder, they're different in elemental essence, but the energetic template from which they arose, so to speak, universally speaking, is a match. He said, think of it as matter and antimatter. Shungite being matter and the prima matra being antimatter. He's not saying they were actually matter and antimatter. He's just giving it, a symbolic representation, the two parts coming together. So I haven't done it yet because I don't have the shungite powder, but I am going to mix a little bit together, see what happens if I ascend or what. But anyway, he wants that mixture to go into the nodospheres. I'm going to put you on pause for just a moment here. These nodospheres, along with the other projects that are going on, not in and of by themselves. Remember, there's one keg in the wheel, but it's an important keg. They will be able to disrupt this whole G5 thing. How it disrupts it, is it going to be totally successful? All these are questions up in the air. I don't know at this point. But I feel confident enough that they will do some good in disrupting the G5. If we do it right, if we connect it right, and all the other cogs in the wheel do their part and connect and do what they need to do, that this can happen. And we can take back our power system, and this is one part of doing that. I believe very strongly that you have the other part, another part. What the work you're doing, it's already part of that. You don't have to be channeling those to get it. It's you and what you're bringing through in your own way and in your own vibrational presence is part of this very strongly. So your part and my part are two parts of a bigger whole. So am I concluding here? I certainly should be after, I know this is probably pretty long by now. But let me just think, I do have some links I'm going to be putting in the email that I send you with the link to this video that is unlisted. It's, it's for you. You can share it with your colleagues. It's not secret or anything. Everything I'm telling you here well, what is secret, sort of, is about the NEAAF project. We're keeping that under wraps. So you can share it with your colleagues, but that's not something I want a lot of people to hear, simply because they'll ask it to remain that way. But I have his permission to share it with you and your colleagues, Walt, and I'm sorry, I've forgotten the other lady's name. So, gosh, I lost my train of thought now. Oh, yes. So the links I'm sending you, one of the things that came to me into my field of presence here about 5 months ago was the C60 molecule. I'd never heard of that before. And when that came up, Thoth just targeted it for me, and he gave me some information on that resin. I haven't had a chance to get to him with shungite yet. We all know about shungite, but I'd like to have Thoth's take on it as well. And I haven't gotten to that yet, but I do have the information he gave me on the C60 molecule, which is fascinating. And I am taking from what are the names? From Live Longer Labs. I'm taking their C60 in olive oil. So I'm going to give you a link to that, but on that page, it starts out, for people that don't know anything about C60, a bunch of stuff that you probably know everything about. So you just scroll down the page, and when you get to the parts that's about Thoth's information, that is where you can start reading. And it's not that long at that part. The rest of it is scroll down until you get to that. And that's the new part, the part that you probably won't be familiar with, but it may ring some bells. So that's that information that I wanted to share with you. And the other is what I recently received from Thoth, having to do with smart meters. And this is not about health. This is a whole nother thing. And I think I really want you to know about this. Maybe you already do, but that's something I want to share with you. So those are the two most important things. I might find a few other little things I'm going to put in the email as well. But I realize this is a lot, and I haven't even scratched the surface of things I'd like to share with you. But, I want to see if there's resonance here, and if you'd like to continue a conversation, a two-way conversation on these things. So I think that's all that I want to share with you right now. And I apologize for the length of this, but believe me, I cut it way down to get it into this video. So thank you for listening, Nancy.